Hello, hello, it's Ellie again. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm talking about the headlines because I've been reading the headlines, catching up on the news, and I'm thoroughly disgusted. Just thoroughly disgusted. Do I sound disgusted? I don't know. I sound like I'm giggling at them. But a lot of the headlines aren't that funny. But you know what they are? They're actually evidence of the fact that it's just all gone to pot. Remember your grandfather or your father or even your great-grandfather would sit down with the newspaper for half an hour or an hour and digest everything that was happening in the headlines and then put the paper away and go build a fence or, or tinker with his car or go fishing or go to work or whatever it was that he did. And he'd be able to enjoy the rest of the day. It's just not like that anymore. Now it's kind of we're subscribed to a whole bunch of noise and that's all it is. It's not even news anymore. It's just noise. And the headlines are not about teaching us anything. They're all about emotional manipulation. And that's basically it. And I think it's really important to be reminded of this because we're all digesting this stuff and it's so bad for the soul. It really is. They're engineered, the headlines these days are engineered for emotion, and this is across the board. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you are, what your belief system is, what your ideology is, nothing. It's all about fear and outrage and forming some kind of tribal identity that, you're either in the group or you're out of the group. And all of the tactics that they use are designed to drive clicks as well, to get you to look. Yeah. Made you look, and go, made you look. That's exactly what it's about. Imagine, when someone says, haha, made you look, and you kind of get this pang of frustration at them because they've wasted your time by just tricking you into looking at something. We've forgotten to feel that bit of outrage at the people who do that with clickbait and with explosive kind of headlines about things. But that's exactly what headlines are for now. They're not about news. They're not about informing us. They are about information, but not good information and not actual news. It's just to drive profits, which are used by monetization and clicking and confirming our negativity bias as well, because negativity bias is really addictive. Who is it that says, the other day I did a survey for you guys, or a poll, to find out if anyone knew who Neville Goddard was. And, about 50% of people, I think, actually I'll have a look at the exact, I can't, hang on. I'll have a look at the exact figures. I've turned my phone onto airline mode, or what do they call it? Airplane mode, because the phone always rings when I'm recording. Let's have a look here. I'm going to have a look and see what these poll results were, and then I'll tell you. So Neville Goddard. Yeah, okay. So we got about 550 something votes, and 38% of those votes knew who Neville Goddard is, and the other 62% had no idea. Well, Neville Goddard is on the level of Eckhart Tolle in terms of, or even Edgar Cayce in terms of his insight. He was from Jamaican born. He did live in the United States for a while. He was born, I think, in around about 1902 or 1911 or something like that, and he died pretty young. I think he was in his 50s. He wrote, he didn't write a book. He wrote short books, like little, I don't want to call them novellas, because they were actually the same kind of insight, spiritual insight. And his messages were very simple about embracing the consciousness. In fact, they're basically the physicists are proving him true right now. The astrophysicists, let me try this again. The quantum physicists are proving him true right now, because he said back in the early 1900s that we are immersed in consciousness. and that we are not conscious. We are immersed in the eternal consciousness that exists. And for as long as we think of ourselves as being individual, we've kind of lost the plot. We are actually just tapping into the universal consciousness. And so he's a very interesting fellow. I've actually just finished listening to a book by a fellow called something Horowitz, Michael Horowitz, I think, or Matthew Horowitz, who compiles a number of Neville Goddard's books together, little booklets together, and then does an introduction to them and then reads them word for word. Because he wrote generally papers or small novella-styled books, and they can be compiled into 1 or 2 volumes of a full-sized book. But he was a very interesting character, and he was well before his time. He was considered to be a mystic because he believed in there being a higher power linked to the higher consciousness, and that the soul is eternal and the spirit is on loan, and that it embodies the physical self in one iteration in order to teach us. And then we take that learning as a spirit into the soul to be able to return and build from that knowledge. Very similar to what we're hearing about in spiritual circles now. So if you haven't heard of him, that's who he is. I don't know why he's not a big name like many of the others who've passed, but he is a very similar voice and well ahead of his time. And so he probably should receive more recognition. However, what was the purpose of today? We were talking about the headlines and this negativity bias. That's right. The reason why I mentioned Neville Goddard is he stated, and this is a quote from him, I think he said, if humanity was as passionate and enthusiastic about what it wants rather than what it doesn't want, then the world would be an entirely different place. And that's where the headlines are making a mess for us and putting us into the situation that really is just a mess. This negativity bias is where we're far more likely, it's this phenomenon where people are far more likely to engage with things that are alarming or divisive or negative. All you have to do, if you don't believe me, is take a look at the comments section from my videos where I start talking about love and compassion and being part of a collective and being more tolerant of each other, and then go to your favorite kind of outrage machine and take a look at all the comments there, because people are really enthusiastic about engaging when it comes to pointing the finger at something and expressing outrage towards something. But when it comes to true spiritual awakening and working on the inner and working on the collective, people tend to not be quite so excited about that. And that's one of the most profound things that Neville Goddard stated. He said the world would be an entirely different place, and reality would be a far nicer existence if people invested as much energy in what they want as they do to fight what they don't want. That in itself tells you a lot of what you might want to know about Neville Goddard. But look him up if you don't know much about him. And if you're interested, I can always do a show on him too and just talk about his history and things like that and some of his major teachings and then what happened to him in the end. I don't even know. Just let me know if you're interested. But the headlines also these days, they use the concept of outrage to create loyalty. It's the whole building an enemy for us to collectively hate thing. Think about those, the mean girls at school, when you were in school and there was a little gaggle of mean girls and they were always pointing the finger at someone else. They either had this victim that they were always picking on, or they were the victim, they were the collective victim of someone else. And they were always pointing outward and saying, pointing to something and saying, we need to dislike this person, or this person is bad, or this person is, a problem, because it helps to keep their little collective joined together and cohesive. I actually know I'll tell you. I obviously will not tell you who, but there is a YouTuber that I met in person back in the 19... Actually, I can even tell you the year. I think it was 1993. In 1993, I met someone who is now on YouTube, and you may have even been aware of her for some time. And I met her in very peculiar circumstances. My boyfriend and her boyfriend were friends. And so we just happened to be in the same room one day when her boyfriend came to visit my boyfriend, and I was there, and she came with her boyfriend. And we met, and it was all very, just hello, my name is so-and-so. And then she invited me to go to her house because she was collecting some people and doing this thing at her dining room table. And so I showed up, and I enjoyed the evening, and then I went home, and I didn't see her again because we weren't really friends. This was just, her saying, why don't you come and experience this? And I said, all right. And so the next time I saw her must have been, I don't know, a month later. This is the only times I'd ever seen her. But this time when she came again with her boyfriend to my boyfriend's house, this time she was very, very different. And she actually made a lot of accusations against me, saying I was a really bad person and telling my boyfriend that I'm a really bad person. And I was there, and I was a bit confused. And I was like, I don't understand what you mean. What do you mean? What have I done? I don't even know you. What have I done? And she wouldn't tell me. She just said, no, you're just a very bad person. I said, okay. I never saw her again. And then I discovered that she was on YouTube all these years later, like 30 years later. And you know what? I figured out what her issue was. She likes to have a person to blame. And that's how she collects support. That's how she collects loyalty, is she needs to find a common enemy. And that's what she was doing with me. And the only reason why I figured that out is because she actually does that for a living now on YouTube. So there you go. And that's all I'm going to tell you. But yes, I do recognize you. If you ever get to see this video, I recognized you from the very first moment I saw you. You were just 30 years older, but as was I, obviously. And I still have no idea what I did. But this outrage, this concept of outrage, the reason why it works is because it helps people to feel as though they're in a tribe. They have people on their side, because for as long as they have people on their side, then they're safely in the us category. And people want to belong, don't they? They want to. And so if you've got a choice between being us and them, most people will choose to be us. It's just instinctive, because it's the survival instinct of wanting to be part of a pack so that we can all survive. But it's very artificial now, because the person that you're pointing at probably is not as much of the enemy as you might think. In fact, you may have been swept up by this concept of using this outrage to create a sense of loyalty for the purposes of benefiting that fellow or that person at the center of the loyalty factor, which is, the news broadcaster or the channel that you're watching or something like that. So headlines are very good at that. They create loyalty with outrage by giving someone a common enemy to distrust or dislike or fear. They use repetition as well. So I know, for example, there's certain mantras that we will hear over and over and over again. Some of them are really obvious, but some of them are not quite so obvious. And by constantly repeating the same thing, the same slogan over and over again, it actually is the building of a belief system. So if something is stated again and again and again as though it's true, ultimately it will be believed as being true. So for example, the political sides can be used as an example. I recently looked at this website called allsides.com. It's a little bit like Ground News, but it actually is just, I think it's a not-for-profit website that's been running for a few years. And it's actually a really interesting website. It's got headlines for the day and for the week. It's free to read. You can subscribe for more in-depth, but it's free to read. And they're very transparent. They actually show where their money is going, who the owners are. And the owners are a combination of left and right-leaning investors. It shows how much money each owner has invested in this organization. And it shows you the left, the right, and the center perspective for the news stories that they cover. It also measures the political bias of every single news and information forum that appears on the list, which is probably about 100 or so. And I was curious, and so I looked up your obvious players like Fox News and MSNBC and things like that. And this just goes to show that, the reason why there's so much conflict and division at the moment is because it really is quite evenly split. MSNBC, for example, because I know a lot of people here are probably either currently watching or have been watching MSNBC like myself. MSNBC has been rated as left. It's around 3 point something percent. So it's about 3/4 of the way to being far left. I think you could, because they do have kind of like a dial, and it sits at around about the 3/4 before it hits the far, far left. Fox News is exactly the same, but it's 3/4 until it hits the far, far right. And so they sit very much in direct opposition to each other, with MSNBC considered to be a left, not left-leaning, but fully left organization or reporter, and Fox News being fully right in their perspective. But when you click on them, if you click on MSNBC, it shows that 49% of Democrats or Democrat or left-leaning people trust MSNBC, but 49% don't. And the same for the right. You've got, 11% trust, but 11% don't. That kind of thing. It's actually exactly the same. And it goes to show that that people have very strong views on either side. It's not just one side or the other. And that's because each side is creating a sense of loyalty with their side by using outrage. So MSNBC is creating a base of loyalty by expressing outrage. And Fox News is building a base of loyalty by expressing outrage. And that's what the headlines do. But they also continuously repeat the same things over and over again, because when they do that, it starts to be believed more and more and more. It doesn't mean it's true. They also use really alarming words. So things like, in the headlines, they'll use words like shocking or devastating or explosive, or the word backlash might be used. Things like meltdown as well. If there's a meltdown of some kind. I think one of the things that's happening at the moment is there is a MAGA meltdown taking place, apparently, but only according to the left, because according to the right, it doesn't exist. And the same on the other side. The right is reporting that Democrats are in meltdown because there's a lot of difference in opinion between the far left and the center left and things like that. And so it's being called a meltdown by the right. And so they do exactly the same kind of thing. But they also use labels like, calling people liberals or calling people conservatives, or saying that they're woke, for example, or anti-woke, or even just anti or pro or something. These are all very divisive, and those kinds of words like liberal, conservative, woke, anti or pro, they cut right through the middle of people and they polarize them. So you either sit on one side or the other, which means that it's very hard to meet in the middle. I mentioned this website, which is called allsides.com. And one of the reasons why I thought I'd mention it is because I was reading a little bit about them on their website. And they have one tagline somewhere, which I'm sure you'd find if you went on there, which I loved. And it said, "We are owned and operated by left and right perspectives. And somehow, mysteriously, we happen to get along." And I thought that's because it's possible for left and right to get along. The thing is, only if they get away from this divisive kind of perspective that's being drummed into them by the headlines. So labeling is one of the things, but also false urgency is another one. And these headlines, they use things like CNN has endless breaking news. And I've noticed that MSNBC now has endless breaking news as well, constantly breaking news. And also using language like breaking, for example, or breaking news, or now is a really important thing. Watch now, or must see episode, must see is another thing. It creates this false sense of urgency, even though the story itself might not be time sensitive. It probably doesn't even really matter whether you watch it now or watch it next month. It makes no difference to the world, except it'll be much easier to monetize if you watch it right now. That's basically it. And they also, I've done an episode on this recently, which I'll make sure I link in the description box, where I've talked about how the news at the moment, if you want to call it the news, the information or the noise out there is very selective about what it tells you. It doesn't provide you with the full context. It gives you a slice of something that's true, but it also omits things that are true that would help you to understand the context correctly. And so they quote out of context, or they cherry pick the information that they're sharing with you to be able to steer your perception so that you will believe it to be a certain thing. And there is actually something right now sitting on All News, which I'm not sure if it'll still be there by the time you see this video. It might be, about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders went on a podcast and made an announcement to the podcast hosts about how he thought that Donald Trump was doing really well on securing the border, far better than Joe Biden. Well, the left, the center, and the right have all reported that in entirely different ways, and they've all done it. Well, in particular, the left and the right have done it by cherry picking some of his quotes. So the left have cherry picked bits that either kind of interpreted a certain way, and the right have cherry picked other bits of his interview to be able to show it in an entirely different way. And you'd probably find that the center has a more grounded perspective, but may also be cherry picking as well. It's just sort of the way it works these days. I would say that the best ways to sidestep this kind of manipulation of the mind is twofold. The things that I do are, I've obviously mentioned already, All Sides and Ground News. Well, All Sides for me is quite a new experience, but I will be looking at it more frequently now that I know that it exists. And I will also look at the bias ratings and how they calculate the bias ratings as well. So it's a very transparent website. I actually really like what I've been able to see so far. I love the fact that you can look at who the investors are of all sides. You can see how much they've invested, what their background is, what their viewpoint is, their ideological or political viewpoint is, and also the way that they explain how they rate all of the different news forums as well, because it shows what they've based their decision on. I really like that. It's just very transparent. And so you can also invest, or I don't know if it's investing. I don't know whether it's an investment or just a donation. I didn't look at it closely enough, but it is it's also financed by viewers. And so people who use the platform can invest in it to keep it going as well. I think it's kind of got like this not-for-profit-y kind of existence or it's user finance now and things like that. But anyway, I found it really interesting. I'm also an affiliate for Ground News, and I get my news from there. But I would be getting my news from Ground News, where I can have a look at the different perspectives, and also from All Sides as well from now on. But I also set really firm boundaries. And so when it comes to all the other stuff, I'll set myself, maybe an hour a week just to see if there's anything I'm missing. And I got to tell you, even just with the Ground News subscription, I'm not missing anything. not much has changed. I mean, yes, in the scheme of things, if you look back 6 months, things have changed. But day to day to day, it's just a new take on the same thing and a new take on the same thing. And there really are only maybe 5 headlines that have been coming and going from the news for months, with little pockets of this and that in between, and that's it. And so I really limit my bias digestion. And it makes me a happier person as a result of that. I have found that ever since I stopped being sort of binging news, I'm just happier. Binging the news didn't make the world a better place. It didn't make me more informed. It didn't tell me anything. All it did was it upped the anxiety level and it upped the outrage level. Now I don't have any of that, but I still know what's going on. And I don't have as strong an opinion on it anymore either, even though I do know what's going on, because my opinion and being aware of every tiny little slice of it is not going to make the world a better place. What's going to make the world a better place is if I do the hard work to work on my spiritual inner self and take care of my body and take care of my life and live a good life and be a good person. That's going to change the world. But digesting and digesting and digesting and digesting all kinds of outrageous stuff doesn't do me any good at all. And it doesn't even get me ready for anything either. All it does is give me stress. And so that's what I do, is I limit the amount of bias that I digest, and then I look at I tend to go ground news because I just have made a habit of it now, and it's my home page when I turn the laptop on, when I turn the desktop on. But I look at that to see what's happening every day, and then I turn it off. And I give myself a lot of free headspace, and it makes a lot of difference. But I also had an idea about how someone could figure out if what they're watching or listening to or reading is just an emotional manipulation. And I thought, you know what, I wonder, this might actually work. I haven't tried it myself, but I'm going to try it when I see a headline that really is persuasive to me. I've kind of gone beyond it now to the point where these headlines don't really capture my emotions anymore, because I see them for what they are. Once you recognize the manipulation, it's really hard to be manipulated. But if I do happen to see a headline, this is what I'm going to do. And I'd love for you to try this and tell me if it worked. Pick one of your favorite whoever's, anywhere you get your information from, and pick a headline or a story, whether it's a Substack, whether it's a news report. Click the link of it and put it into artificial intelligence. So go to ChatGPT or go to Copilot or one of the others and put the link in and say, please summarize this information on this link in a factual, non-bias, neutral language, and do it in 2 paragraphs. And see what artificial intelligence does. What it's going to do is it's going to tell you the neutral, factual, non-biased, non-emotional version of whatever's written. And chances are, when you read that 2 paragraphs of neutral, factual, non-biased, non-emotional interpretation, you will have far less of an emotional response to it. It'll be like you read it in the newspaper back in the 1950s, just like your granddad did. Try that and see how it works. See if it makes you feel a little bit better about the news. And I'm also going to go out and I'm going to see if I can find a headline that stirs my emotions in the same way that it used to. And when I find one, I will do the same thing. It's really hard to be freaked out by the news now, because when I can see the manipulations at play, it's really hard for them to get me. And so I guess I'm missing out on that, which I've got no problem with whatsoever. Anyhow, you may have noticed I'm doing slightly more rambling these days. I've got just so much to kind of get out there. And I've also just decided not to be quite so organized. And so you'll find that my videos are not going to be very heavily edited. Instead, I'll just talk, and you take what you love take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And I'll see you again in the next video. And so before I go, I wanted to let people know I have a second channel. It's a brand new channel. It's called Tarot Well Done. And all of my tarot readings will be taking place on the Tarot Well Done channel. I'll leave a link for it in the description for today's show, and it probably appears in the description for all of my shows from now on. So that if you're looking for the tarot readings, you'll find them there. It has been radio silence the past few days while I've been moving and unpacking and everything, but it will start moving along now as time goes on. And also don't forget, if you have loved today's video, if you learned something, or if you just enjoyed the company and plan on coming back, do subscribe. And don't forget to press like and to share and to comment, build a community, be supportive of one another, and I will see you again next time. This is Ellie Dreams Down Under. Welcome to the new world. I love knowing you're here, and I'll see you in my dreams.